On this Wednesday night, a warning for protesters in Ottawa. Police say get out now or face arrest.
No, I'll stay wherever I want.
Plus, the political debate over whether the Emergencies Act is necessary.
The Prime Minister has not provided any legal justification.
The threshold was met for the Emergencies Act.
Russia claims it's pulling back troops from near Ukraine. NATO says not true.
We are at a pivotal moment in the history of Ukraine, Europe, and global stability.
We're on the ground in eastern Poland as Western allies meet. And universal donor organs, the Canadian experiment that could revolutionize transplant surgery.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The Prime Minister and federal cabinet ministers are defending their decision to invoke the Emergencies Act, and police in Ottawa are now handing out warnings to people who have been allowed to occupy the area next to Parliament Hill for almost 3 weeks now. You must leave the area now, police warn. Anyone blocking streets or assisting others in the blocking of streets are committing a criminal offense and you may be arrested. You must immediately cease further unlawful activity or you will face charges. And for the first time since these protests began, the government connected the organizers of the Ottawa protest with those arrested in Coutts, Alberta, 4 of whom are charged with conspiracy to commit murder and the seizure by the RCMP of a cache of weapons and ammunition.
Several of the individuals at Coutts have strong ties to a far-right extreme organization with leaders who are in Ottawa. We're talking about a group that is organized, agile, knowledgeable, and driven by an extremist ideology where might makes right.
When asked if he has clear evidence of any direct ties, the minister would only say the groups share the same rhetoric and ideology. We will get to more on all of that in just a moment, but we begin with what's happening near Parliament Hill. Abigail Bimman starts off our coverage tonight.
This isn't going against the law.
Some protesters didn't mind telling police they weren't happy with these warnings.
But what about the people of Ottawa? I'm a person of Ottawa. Yes.
Others stuck them here. By late afternoon, the warning seemed to turn just a few wheels, but didn't stop the street pig roast, nor the noise, even though a judge just extended the injunction against honking.
Don't need to go and arrest these people and make these trucks goes out. We need a prime minister to put his boots on, come and walk and talk with us peacefully. We don't want to hurt him.
Protesters remain defiant. A police warning doesn't change things.
A criminal offense? I don't think it's a criminal offense to be here protesting. This is just fear-mongering. We are peaceful.
Came 2 weeks ago and then we're coming back again on this weekend.
Selena Halma says she was fired from her nursing job at an Ontario hospital for not declaring her vaccination status.
I'm not scared of being here because A, it's peaceful, B, this is what we stand for, and it's no time to step down now.
The new police chief warned what's to come will be something people in Ottawa are not used to seeing, and the local Children's Aid Society put out a warning urging parents to make alternate childcare arrangements in case they're not able to care for their children after any police activity. CAS promising to help reunite families if kids and parents get separated.
Boy, I'd like to get into one hell of a fight. That they're using their children as human shields out there to try to keep us from doing our job, which is protecting Canadians. It's disgraceful.
Under the order, Canadians continue to be allowed to come to Ottawa with their children if they choose to engage in peaceful, lawful protest.
Protest organizers push back against the government, continuing to call for more backup.
Please come. Your country needs you, and we need your support.
But calling this a press conference,
how do you feel about thank you guys for your service?
They get up and leave without answering a single question. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
The Emergencies Act is now in force, but must be debated and voted on in Parliament. That debate begins tomorrow. It's required by law, part of the oversight required so that no government can overreach its powers. The scope of those powers casts a wide net of criminal liability. David Akin looks at what's covered by this emergency order and how the political debate about it is shaping up. David?
Donna, the powers detailed in the Emergencies Act are broad and they could apply right across the country. Blockades or unlawful assemblies are prohibited at all border crossings, all airports, all harbors, ports, power stations, hospitals, and so on. An exhaustive list of infrastructure assets. Those who have gathered at the parliamentary precinct are now, by law, participating in an unlawful assembly and face increased fines, imprisonment, or other sanctions. And anyone thinking of joining the Ottawa protest this long weekend faces the same.
And at worst, you may be tying yourself to dangerous criminal activity.
It is also now illegal to bring a child to an unlawful assembly. And that's a big deal because lots of parents have already brought their kids to the Parliament Hill occupation, and the presence of those children makes things a lot trickier for law enforcement. All of these Emergency Act provisions will automatically expire in 30 days, unless extended by the government. Notably, it will be up to local police forces, not politicians, to decide when and where an assembly or a blockade is unlawful. But that means the Emergencies Act could apply to blockades or protests in provinces such as Alberta and Quebec, where there are premiers who oppose the use of the Emergencies Act. Senators and MPs will debate and vote on these measures later this week. The Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives will vote against, hoping to end the measures.
The Prime Minister has not provided any legal justification for the use of the Emergencies Act, a historic unfettered power grab.
But the NDP are expected to vote in favour, agreeing with the Liberal rationale.
The measures that we have brought forward are targeted, temporary, and proportionate to the threat that exists in our country.
Now, the vote in the Senate could be a bit of a wild card. In any event, as politicians begin to debate, it's worth noting that the only place right now in the entire country where there is an illegal blockade or protest subject to the Emergencies Act is right here on Parliament Hill. Donna?
All right, David Akin on Parliament Hill tonight. Thanks. Yeah, the blockade near the U.S. border in Coutts, Alberta is over. 13 people were arrested in connection with that event. 4 of them are charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Canada's public safety minister linked those arrested to organizers of the Ottawa protest and says the illegal blockades posed a threat to national security. Tracy Nagai reports on the ongoing investigation.
While the blockade at the Coutts border crossing is gone, the investigation into those responsible for it is ramping up, with police now digging into what's being described as a small organized group of protesters with a militant mindset and the ability to get their hands on these: long guns, handguns, ammunition, and body armor.
The dangerous criminal activity occurring away from the TV cameras and social media posts was real and organized, and it could have been deadly for citizens, protesters, and officers.
Among the 13 people arrested, 4 face the most serious charges of conspiracy to commit murder, accused of plotting to murder RCMP officers in connection with the protest.
We're talking about a group that is organized, agile, knowledgeable, and driven by an extremist ideology.
We need police officers as well, who will have the courage to resist unlawful orders.
And Global News has learned some protesters intended to expand their efforts all the way to Ottawa.
If the government of Alberta thinks that the protest is over and the threat is gone, then they're more naive than I even thought.
Neil LeMay is a retired Mountie with 30 years of policing experience. His security firm found some protesters so emboldened they discussed targeting critical infrastructure nationally, including airport cargo terminals and leaning into religion and far-right ideologies to recruit.
It is extensively quoting the Bible for justifications to take up arms against the government, to overthrow the government.
Right now, Alberta RCMP releasing few details about those charged or whether there may be more arrests to come. Tracy Nagai, Global News, Calgary.
In southern Manitoba, RCMP say Highway 75 is now clear of protesters and traffic is flowing at the border crossing in Emerson. Farm equipment, semi-trucks and other vehicles packed up and rolled out today, escorted by the RCMP. Officers say they made a deal with the protesters to end the blockade, which started last Thursday.
We're going to have nobody charged, nothing towed, nobody injured, no arrest. It's a perfect solution.
RCMP say they'll keep a presence in Emerson to help ensure traffic keeps moving. The disruption costs more than $70 million a day in cross-border trade. Well, the economy has taken a major hit from the blockades and from COVID-19. The inflation rate surged to a 30-year high last month. The rate climbed to 5.1% in January. The cost of almost everything is going up, especially housing, groceries, and gas, driven in part by stress on supply chains. Fuel prices jumped more than 31% last month over what they were a year ago. Rising inflation will put more pressure on the Bank of Canada to hike interest rates, possibly as early as the beginning of March. No signs of de-escalation coming up. We take you to Eastern Europe as NATO allies examine how to bolster defenses against Russia. There are more mixed signals about what Russia is planning in Ukraine. Moscow claims it's pulling back some of its forces from the Ukrainian border, but NATO and Ukraine say they've seen no signs of de-escalation. They say there is evidence the Kremlin is adding troops. As Jackson Prosco explains, the White House is warning of a fresh attempt by Russia to create a pretext for an invasion.
Ukraine had declared this a day of national unity, the day the West had warned Russia might mount a large-scale assault. But the only military action came in the form of drills, overseen by President Volodymyr Zelensky. Ukrainians practiced firing American-made anti-tank missiles and bombing runs meant to take out a column of invading Russian tanks. We are not afraid of any people, of any enemy, Zelensky told the troops. Moscow may have blinked for now, at least that's the claim. Russia released video of some of its troops and tanks returning to bases. Few believe it's any kind of meaningful de-escalation.
We continue to see critical units moving toward the border, not away from the border.
NATO defense ministers remain deeply cautious, unwilling to trust Russia until they can verify its intent.
We look forward to seeing evidence of the withdrawal of troops on Russia's part, but we need to prepare for any eventuality.
What Russia does is more important than what it says. And Russian media report the country is suddenly investigating what it claims are mass graves in the disputed pro-Russian region of Donbass, where Vladimir Putin this week claimed genocide is taking place. The White House warns it could all be an excuse for Putin to launch military action.
There could be a range of false flags and pretexts that we would expect would precede an invasion.
Though the Kremlin denies responsibility, Ukraine is already navigating one of the worst cyber attacks in its history. It took down banks and government websites. It has not ended the resolve of the Ukrainian people to defend their country. Tonight, the warnings about an imminent attack are growing stronger. The U.S. believes Russian troops may have moved into fighting position, and the U.K. warns the Russian military is building field hospitals to treat wounded soldiers. Donna?
All right, Jackson, thank you. NATO countries in Eastern Europe are on high alert. Poland shares a border with Ukraine and is a NATO member, and that's where thousands of soldiers have been sent. Our Europe Bureau Chief Crystal Gamansing is in southeast Poland tonight. Crystal?
Donna, American soldiers here in southeastern Poland are hard to miss. Throughout the day, we saw convoys of military vehicles headed to a makeshift base about an hour away and Chinook helicopters overhead. There's urgency as Americans move into Poland, strengthening NATO's eastern flank. Thousands of personnel, some just arrived, preparing for a Russian escalation or invasion. There's been a flurry of activity here at this staging area. We have seen numerous Humvees coming and going, at least a half a dozen RAF semi-coaches taking soldiers to and from this location. Both American soldiers we have seen, as well as Polish soldiers. They're here to ensure the safety of those living in this and other NATO countries. But their presence underscores the potential for war.
This is so very frightening and kind of sad, so I'm a little afraid about this.
From this part of southeastern Poland, it's only about an hour's drive to the Ukrainian border. Between neighbors, the greatest needs are known. Urgent medical care and housing for refugees will need to be prioritized if there's an invasion, says Ukraine's ambassador.
They don't know how many they can adopt, the Ukrainians. We are trying to convince them that we will do our best not to create a situation when Ukrainians will have to flee the country.
Fighting in the Donbass region has been going on for years, but when war first broke out between Ukraine and pro-Russian separatists in 2014, hundreds sought safety in Poland. Some analysts fear the territory could be used as a bargaining chip, along with Ukraine's desire to join NATO.
It can seem to some of our Western allies to be an appropriate compromise in order to stop the worst possible scenario like real war.
Those issues are critical to Ukraine's future and to many, too big to abandon. Donna?
All right, Crystal Gamansing in Poland tonight. Thanks. Cryptocurrency concerns the federal government's crackdown on the money fueling the Ottawa protests may hit a roadblock. Following the money donated to support the disruptive protests that have happened in Canada is complicated. With the Emergencies Act now invoked, the federal government says the police and the banks have the authority to stop the flow of cash. As Anne Gaviola explains, that means more than just traditional forms of currency.
The lifeblood of this protest is the funding behind it. Organizers have raised more than $10 million, first on crowdfunding platform GoFundMe, then over Give, Send, Go. But it's been one obstacle after another for protesters to actually get the money. On Monday, sweeping changes targeting banks and crowdfunding platforms were announced under the Emergencies Act.
These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies.
What the world has witnessed here is the power of government to manipulate the flows of people's hard-earned dollars.
All of this driving the movement to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and even digital assets like NFTs. Anti-money laundering experts tell Global News these fall into a gray area. Crypto experts say cracking down on Bitcoin itself is complicated, but authorities have an opportunity to act when that crypto is turned into cash, gift cards, or prepaid cards. This forensic accountant is waiting to find out more about what specifically is covered under the Emergencies Act once it makes its way through Parliament.
This is a fascinating shift, and it provides lots of powers in financial institutions that, I'm not sure is a great thing for the long term.
Alex Tapscott's specialty is blockchain, the technology that underpins Bitcoin. He warns of unintended consequences with the spotlight on Bitcoin and other digital assets.
Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's take a cautious and deliberate approach to regulating any new technology that comes along.
The concern among technologists is that temporary new rules put in place during an emergency could eventually be adopted and hinder economic growth and innovation in fintech long after this convoy is cleared out. Donna?
All right, Anne Gaviola, thanks. Next, the Canadian experiment that could change organ transplants and save more lives. A dream Olympic send-off for Canadian speed skater Charles Amelin. The 37-year-old helped his teammates win gold in the men's 5,000-meter short track relay. This is the 6th career medal for Amelin, making him Canada's most decorated male Winter Olympian. He's expected to retire later this year. And for the first time in 16 years, Canada's men's hockey team is heading home from the Olympics without a medal. Sweden beat the Canadian men's team today. Canada still has a chance for Olympic hockey gold, though. The women's team faces off against the United States tonight. Well, from athletic feats to what could be a big step forward in organ transplants, there is a shortage of donor organs. Many people die waiting for one, and people with rare blood types have an even smaller chance of getting one that matches their blood type. Canadian researchers are working to change that by changing the blood itself. Jamie Morocker explains.
Elizabeth Ostrander spent the majority of the pandemic 2 years waiting for a lung transplant.
I was getting a little bit frustrated and just depressed about, not getting the match.
The wait is excruciating and can be extended for those with certain blood types.
If I have someone that is very sick and, for example, is an O blood type, and I get a B or A donor offer for transplantation, I cannot transplant that patient.
Dr. Marcelo Saipel and his team are trying to level the playing field. In a new experiment, the first of its kind, they say they've converted donor lungs with one blood type to a universal type.
Then patient in need of a organ transplant would have access to all the organs regardless of their blood type.
Blood type is determined by the presence of antigens on the surface of the red blood cells in our bodies. Type A has the A antigen, B has B, AB has both A and B, and type O, the universal blood type, has none. Saipel needed to clear any antigens from the organs, and Stephen Withers at the University of British Columbia had the perfect enzyme.
The enzymes themselves are ones that we discovered by hunting within the human gut microbiome, which in reality means in human feces.
Those enzymes were injected into one lung from a type A donor. The other was left untreated. Researchers then introduced type O blood to both, simulating what would happen when an organ is transplanted into a patient.
And what we could see is that these lungs did not present any signs of rejection.
Clinical trials are next. Elizabeth, who finally got her lung, by the way, is hopeful.
There'd be more transplants, more organs available.
Potentially breathing new life, experts say, into an unfair and outdated system. Jamie Morocker, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Francis, Saskatchewan. There are beautiful spots all over this country. Please email us yours to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.